Hey, lead learners, welcome to the Learning Lab, the podcast dedicated to empowering educational leaders like you to lead with capacity, competency, and confidence. I'm Dr. Lisa Weir, aka Lead Learner Lisa, and I am your host, and in each episode, we'll explore the latest trends, insights, and strategies to help you navigate the ever-evolving landscape of education. Whether you're a seasoned administrator, an aspiring principal, or a teacher leader, this podcast is your go-to resource for inspiration and practical advice. We believe that strong leadership is the cornerstone of successful schools and thriving students, and we are here to support you on your journey. Join us as we dive into conversations with visionary educators, share real-world success stories, and provide actionable tips to enhance your leadership skills. Together, we'll build a community of lead learners committed to making a lasting impact in education, changing lives, and making futures one mind at a time. So let's get started and lead the way to a brighter future for our students and our schools. Hey, lead learners, I'm Dr. Lisa, and I'm excited to have Mrs. Casey Kroll join me in the Learning Lab today. Casey Kroll's background includes 17 years of experience in education, and during those 17 years, when I tell you Casey has worn many hats, she has worn many, many hats. She has been a classroom teacher, assistant principal, athletic director, Title IX coordinator, and currently Casey is a K-8 district MTSS coordinator and principal of her early childhood program. Casey has her master's degree in art of teaching with an emphasis in curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Casey, welcome, and thank you for joining me in the Learning Lab today to talk about leadership and creating cultures built on commitment and just getting a common vision with your staff.
Thanks for having me.
I am blessed to say that Casey is not just a guest on the Learning Lab today, but Casey is what I call a member of my work family. I have the blessing of doing what I love with people that I love, and that love just really never ends. So I'm so excited to have her here today. We're going to really talk about and dive into what it's like to lead through change and challenges. And so I'm going to start with a little story, and hopefully Casey will remember this. And I want to also start by saying I'm really honored to sit here and talk with Casey, especially when I think about how our relationship started off. During my last principalship, I took over the principalship at a school for students who got second chances. They were adjudicated youth, expelled youth, or in foster care. And there had been a sudden change in the leadership there, and I was asked to come and be a principal. And oftentimes we know that change can be very challenging, and it sometimes can be really challenging when it's actually a place that you already work. And Casey also can relate to that, and you're lifted into this position where people have preconceived ideas about you and or they have had different experiences with you. And knowing that I'm not a perfect person, I remember one experience that really sticks out for me that happened before I became the principal, where Casey was, is we were in a meeting. I think we used to have, maybe it was at Wednesday, Casey, we would have C meetings, and we bring all the schools together. And we were going back and forth, and I think we were at that time looking at standards-based learning, grading, all of that. And in this meeting, there were some particular conversations around the work that needed to be done, and in particular, work that at that time a different staff that I was leading was doing. And so, of course, Mama Bear Lisa comes on the scene, and Casey was one of the individuals there to witness that. And while I take pride in how much I love and stand up for my staff, sometimes we reflect and think of a better way to do that. And so when I think about that and then think about later, I think it was about 4 years later, I stayed there for 4 years. In that time, building that rapport and that trust with the staff that Casey was a part of. And so as leaders, we have the responsibility to really build those bridges and to build that rapport and the relationships with those that we serve. So I want to start and just kind of rewind a little bit and talk about that story and just hear from Casey, her thoughts, and as she went through that journey where we had that very difficult start, and it was highlighted throughout the staff because there had been an abrupt change in leadership.
Well, and I think that that specific meeting, there was a lot of different personalities in that room. And one of the pieces was that all specials were brought together with science. And so there were a lot of strong voices in that science group. And so your team had been already working on that standards-based grading. You had progressed immensely in it, where our team was not there yet. And there was a belief by the specific individual that we weren't going to be able to do that. And it was just like a hard stop. And for you, you were like, this is not a hard stop. This is not that difficult, right? And this is why. And you went ahead and proceeded to go ahead and passionately share that. And for us, right, we didn't know you at all. And we're like, holy cow, this lady's coming in here hot, right? And then it was, I think you're right, it was a week later that when we had that leadership change, that we found out that you were going to be our principal. And we were all like, oh man, she's coming in hot like that. This can be really hard. And that specific strong voice that was in the room was, I'd like to refer to them as the pot stirrer, right? There's always a staff that's a
There's
pot
always that.
and then they sit back and then they watch what has happened. And she was really fired up about that. And so it was almost trying to get people on her team, right? So like an anti-Lisa group, right? And I'm not one to go ahead and take on other people's thoughts. However, when you are friends with people or in groups with people, right? Everyone just assumes that you share the same vision or that those same thoughts and ideas. And in fairness to you too, or maybe not fairness to you too, the leader that we had had before you had been there as a teacher and as a dean of students. And then this person was an excellent school leader, right? I explained to people that I would have held his hand and walked off a bridge with him because his leadership was excellent. And the thought that we were going to change, just the idea of change, not that it was you, it could have been
Right.
somebody else, right? The idea of change was very disruptive. And as we're creatures of habit, right? And change is hard for everyone. And some of us are have a little bit more difficult time with it. And I'm one of those people. And so it was scary. And I think that's the only way to explain it. It was scary. And then to know that you had that level of passion about that, it was like, man, is she going to be hard to work for? What am I going to do?
I love that you lifted up the passion piece because oftentimes when I think about my career and interviewing for jobs, and people would ask me what my strength and my growth area was, and I'd always say it's the same thing. I would say my passion is my strength, but it's my growth area. And that particular day and incident was evidence of where it also can be an opportunity to grow. And we know that it's very difficult, especially if the previous leader was, as you described, someone that people really liked. And then it's something that is abrupt. You didn't see it coming. And then you have a new person coming in. And I think a lot of our listeners experience that where they may come when there's change going on, or the change may just be them. And the previous person, and I've seen this happen where the person's loved and then a new person comes in. But I've also seen it where people really didn't care too much for the other leader, but they had been there so long they could predict and they understood and they figured out how to do that dance with that leader. And in this case, here I came and with all of my passion overflowing into the room, and it was a lot for staff. And then just a week later, to hear that I was going to be the new leader. And during that, I remember learning a really valuable lesson too, and needing to just really take some steps back and really just acknowledge what happened in that room and have conversations with people as I was entering into becoming the leader at that school. I wondered, Casey, if you would just share, just reflecting back to our time together, and we had a lot of success with our students. We were a very close-knit staff. But if you could just, for our listeners out there that might be dealing with stepping into that role, or maybe making some mistakes their first or second year, but they really want to turn things around and build that commitment and trust through whatever challenging situations they might be facing, what were some things that you saw that really stuck out to build that level of trust to the point where now, many years later, this is now probably 10, no, this is about 14 years later, you and I are sitting doing a podcast together. So something happened on that journey, those 4 years while I was there, that allowed you to build the trust and rapport. And I had a mentor once tell me, Lisa, you're not leading if nobody's following you. And so if you could just speak to that and what your thoughts are about that.
So I think the job of principal is one part of the job, and working specifically in a charter school, which is where we were at the time, you have to wear a ton of hats, right? And so you weren't just our principal, but you were also our instructional leader. So we didn't have instructional coaching by a different person than our evaluator, right? So you're our evaluator and you're our instructional coach. And I know for me personally, it was important that I was an individual to you, right? And that's just because for me, it's my job, it's my work ethic, it's my passion too, right? And I love what I'm doing and I want to do it well. And so when we were using the leverage of leadership model, which I learned after I became a principal there as well in much more detail, I loved that model and I loved the way that you presented that instructional coaching piece. And I knew I could feel that you were nervous with me and I was nervous with you, but you didn't skip a beat. It's kind of when a kid is naughty, right? And they come back into your class the next day and it's a clean slate, right? And it's not that I had been naughty, but it was this, you knew that I really adored that leader previously. So I was very apprehensive and I wasn't sure what you coming into our environment was going to bring and how I was going to interact. And I had so many things going on. I've been there a long time. Like you said, you've learned to do that dance, right? And I won't, honestly, you were my first female leader that I had ever worked for. And you are a strong, assertive female, as am I. And so it was like, oh, I hope we don't clash, right? Because a lot of times people with those similarities really struggle sometimes together. So I made up my mind that I was just going to go ahead and really, I'll use the words dig in, right? This is what we're doing. This is like, I'm not fighting this. I'm not a toddler, right? What's the work? Let's do this. And it was the way that you presented your instructional coaching with me that helped to build trust. And you could tell very quickly, even though I was a physical education teacher, right? And a health teacher, that I understood data and I understood growth. I understood the importance of reading and math intervention and how to go ahead and put those pieces to work for my students, that I was really passionate about what I did, that I loved our kids and our demographic, and that I worked predominantly with the seniors, right, when it came around your advisory position. And so I wanted them to grow. It was a huge push to get them in those final credits. And so you saw my passion and I knew you did, and I could feel that from you. And so for me, that's what really built that trust, is you saw me, right? And a lot of people, if you're in a leadership position and you feel that way, they don't necessarily see you because they don't want to see you because they think there's a problem, even when there's not a problem. But you didn't do that. You just said to yourself the same thing I said, right? This is what happened in this meeting. I understand that there was a leader that everyone loved and adored and would have walked off a cliff for. But that's not where we are right now. And none of that matters. What only matters is what's right here in front of us. And I think that is what really opened the door for trust. And I feel that that was really intentional on your part. And I think intention is huge. And without that, I don't know if we would have grown that relationship, right? Because it's not just one-sided.
Right.
But that's how the trust grew. And it was through that instructional coaching piece. I didn't care that you were my evaluator. That didn't matter to me. I cared that I was passionate about growing my kids. You could see that. And I would ask you questions about what you thought, and you would give me honest answers, and I would do the work and bring it back excited to you. And you were excited about it too. And it just fired me up about the passion of what we were doing. And that just continued to grow that trust and rapport between the two of us, regardless of what that fired up science teacher felt, right? It wasn't about that. It was about your and my working relationship toward the same goal.
You bring up a couple of things. I had my successful Mondays and I had the word about intentional leadership. And so you brought up being intentional. And I think that's a great tip for listeners to hear, is just really that things are not going to happen by accident. If you're going to build relationships, you have to be really intentional about it. Casey brought something else up too. And I was very intentional about this and had learned this from mentors and so forth, that when you're, number one, presented with a challenge or you're presented with circumstances, I always tell people yesterday was yesterday. I'm a yesterday person. Let's move on. But in addition to that moving on piece, there was some intention around really getting to know people, who they are as a person, who they are as a professional, and who their strengths were, right away, I saw that Casey's strengths were around data. She led our data dig meetings. She was good at that. And I hear so often about people saying that PE teachers aren't instructional leaders. And I give the example all the time. And when I'm giving that example, I'm talking about Casey. I also saw where Casey didn't just care about what she was teaching in the PE class or the health class that she was teaching. I walk in Casey's room and she would have thinking maps up around the room, and kids were walking around and visualizing their thinking. She was incorporating writing and math, and she knew what our school goals were. And so for me, in rebuilding that relationship and that trust, it was learning who she was as a person, but also learning what her strengths were that would add value to what our common vision was. And then asking her to come along, and then knowing when she did that. For example, when there were data digs, I sat in the seats next to teachers and my colleagues taking notes and learning from Casey. So knowing as a leader when to sit down and let someone else lead. And I think that may have also contributed to that rapport that we had. And then I also think about, you lifted up our advisory model.
Mhm.
Casey was really good with the kids, and we had a really tough population. Despite that, 75 to 80% of our kids, they hit their growth goals on their interim assessments. We had kids who graduated early at 15 and 16 years old. And so for Casey, I was like, Casey, you're good at this. And I know these kids can be squirrely, especially when it starts getting warm outside. So I always assigned the senior advisory class to
Yep.
Casey. And so, what my hope was number one, it was good for kids, right? It was going to help meet the organizational goals and things we wanted to do. But it also, when Casey said that she felt like she was seen and understood, it showed like, Casey, I see where your strengths are. I'm not having the math teacher lead the data digs. I'm having the PE teacher lead the data digs. I'm not having the counselor be the advisory person and support the kids. I know that's Casey's strength. And so recognizing the individual strengths of the staff that are there, I think really helped me coming into a challenging situation where the previous leader was loved, the previous leader left suddenly. There, people knew me, and there had been an incident. For all the listeners on here, I'm always professional, so it was nothing unprofessional, but
Wasn't an unprofessional incident.
I'm
It
very
was
passionate,
just
and
passionate.
and my passion can come out, especially when it's about the people that I serve. I advocate. I'm a mama bear, and I am not apologetic at all for that. You also talked about knowing you as an individual, and I remember leaving to take a job, to take a promotion,
I'm
and
gonna
I
cry when you're talking about this. This makes me teary right now.
and I remember crying, sharing with you that you guys that I was leaving, and I remember telling my daughter who was in high school at the time, and she says, "Mom, I thought you would never leave your teachers and never leave your staff. I didn't think I would ever leave them. I had a superintendent tell me you're going to be a superintendent one day." I said, "No, I'm not. I want to stay. This is where I want to stay in this seat." And then lo and behold, that's exactly what I go and do. But I remember when I was leaving. And I think I want to say maybe about 20 staff we had at the time. I don't remember the exact number, but I remember writing individual notes to all the staff. But I also wrote a cheat sheet for the new person coming on that said, "Hey, this person loves warm, fuzzy socks. And this person, when they're like, this is what helps them to," I had tipped on every single person that was there because it was really important to me that even though I was exiting, that not only my students were taken care of, but the people that I had served for 4 years, that they were taken up. I use this all the time, analogy, and I've left roles since then, and I will look back and say, am I leaving the people that I love with a bad babysitter? Am I setting them up for success? And it hurts me to watch if that happens. And so I took a lot of time really putting together just individual notes about each person to help that new leader that was coming into the position following me.
Well,
Any
I'm
other?
glad you did too, because when we had that abrupt change, and then the connection was made with you, because then wound up growing that relationship so tightly with you, right? That, and I said earlier, right? I hate change. Change is not a good thing for me. I want
Right.
everything to
And
be
it's hard for
intentional.
most people, but
It's
yes.
hard. It is tough. And so, but you said there's love there, right? And I felt so connected with you and envisioning the same mission. And we were in the same vision, same mission, right? We were doing it. right? And it was like every cog was in the right place and we were moving in the right direction. And it was just almost like a knife to the heart because you're going, oh my gosh, I have so much trust in this person. Look at me, I'm getting teary now. So much trust in this person, and I have to go ahead and do this again with someone else.
Yeah,
It's hard.
it's really hard. And I appreciate hearing that too. I told Casey before we came on here, I was so happy to see her, but I didn't want to cry and mess up my mascara or anything because we haven't seen each other in a long time, although we've talked to each other and watch each other on social media. But it's great that we develop those relationships that they span over time, right? And you can
Well,
pick up.
and what teacher that you had is sitting there crying? I don't think any teacher probably sitting there crying about me. Maybe they are. I don't know. But after all this time, just to relive that experience, right? By talking to you about that and how impactful it was. It's something that I don't think about,
Mhm,
right? But as we talk about it, it's like, wow, that
mhm,
really was awful for me. That was hard. You
mhm.
leaving was hard.
Mhm. And I think you bring up another point too. We have to remember that the impact that we have on other people, either whatever the circumstances might be, I think as leaders, and I think that's why it was so important to me to make sure that I left all those notes about who likes socks and who, when they're having a bad day, if you take them a candy bar or you bring them in and say, we're going to do some breathing together, or can I cover your class for a few moments? Who likes public acknowledgments and who doesn't? And when you can leave tips like that, then it not only helps that new leader that's coming in, but it's also remembering the people that you serve and supporting them through the change that you have as well. And so, listeners, I hope you pulled a lot of different things out of that. When I think about some of the things that Casey shared, we talked about putting the who before what. We have work to do. We know that it's important work because why? Well, why we do this is for the kids, but really being able to put the people and individuals before the task. I talked a little bit earlier offline about demonstrating vulnerability. And many times, I think, even if I go back to that story, coming back and saying, okay, my passion overflowed in the wrong way. Let me step back and let me show my vulnerability and say, apologize or say, I could have done this differently. I think what else is important that was lifted up here for me, you need to get commitment. We can get buy-in. Your buy-in is more extrinsic, it's more you're using your power and persuasion. But when you build relationships, rapport, and the trust that Casey's talking about, that's when you get commitment. People who are committed to you and committed to following you and your lead and just committed to the work, the common vision.
The values and beliefs, right? Absolutely, because those are individual to a person. And so for you to be able to go ahead and have that impact on someone where you can share the same values and beliefs that you may not have shared initially or thought you didn't share initially, right? And you're that's how you do the work, is what you're saying. That's how you do the work. Because I can lead all day long. And you have said, and I heard you say today, well, I can lead all I want to. If nobody's following me, I'm not leading,
Yeah,
right? That's what you've said. But you're 100% right, and you say, I need to get to know my people. You do need to get to know your people because if you don't know who they are and what they need, how you need to speak to them, right? Because everybody needs something different, like you said, how you need to approach them. Is it a softer touch? Does it have to be an email? What do you need, right? If you don't learn that,
absolutely.
no one's going to follow you. So you can have your vision all you want to and your mission all you want to. But if you can't impact the values and beliefs of somebody else with your leadership, it doesn't matter.
When it's just your vision, you're the only one that sees it. And so no one really knows where to go. And they don't trust you enough to follow you. So we had a really rocky start in this case, but there was a happy yet ironic ending to my leadership. So we shared how it started out really rocky in a moment and a leader that was lost that everyone loved and me stepping into them into that position at that particular school. And as I exited to take a promotion, something really unexpected happened. I was contacted. At first, I thought it was a joke, and I was contacted because I was nominated to be Michigan Principal of the Year. And what was even more interesting is that the nomination was from someone who my start was very rocky with, and they were very uncertain about my leadership. And I want to play something for you and see if you remember this. Give me a second to gear it up.
The thing I really appreciate from a leader, specifically as a staff, is that she gets things done. She fights for her people and she fights for her kids.
You remember that, Casey?
I do. Oh my gosh, that was a long time ago. Oh wow.
It was. And
Yeah.
I want to pick up on the thing that you said, and I'm very honored that you chose me and you nominated me for that. But what sticks out for me, I always knew who my why was, and it was my students. And early on in my leadership, I focused so much on my why, I would forget about my who, which was my staff. And when I listen to that, I hear you say you talk about my staff and you say staff even before the students. And that's not to say that the staff are more important than the students, but by the end of my career, so this was the end of my career as a principal, I had learned that who was my staff, and if I took care of them, they would take care of the students. And to hear you say that, to hear the person, one of the people where it was like, who is this lady coming in here? I'm not sure about this. To come from you, it meant the world to me. And that's why I still have this.
That is amazing. Thank you for saying that because you should know that and obviously you probably have figured this out by now, but otherwise I probably wouldn't have gone as far as I have so far in my principalship and worn so many different hats. But I took that right with me when I went into education leadership after doing my master's in curriculum. I knew that that was how you moved the needle, right? Was to take care of your people. And when I think about where I've been and what principal positions that I have been in or leadership positions that I've been in, every single one of my staff that I have worked with knew that I was passionate. I'll like you. That's not going to be a thing. We get that. But they also knew that I was passionate and I fought for my people. And so I feel like sometimes, how should I say this? Like an administrative traitor when I listen to other school leaders talk, right? Because they're not as passionate about fighting for their people or taking care of their people. And I think to myself, well, I'm going to take care of my people because they can't do what they need to do if I don't provide them with the environment and the tools that they need. And I learned that from you.
Well, thank you. One of the best compliments I ever had. And I think your advice, and I hope that our listeners are listening because as we look in the state of Michigan where teacher turnover is high and people are leaving the field, it's a lot because teachers, they want to feel valued and they haven't always feel valued.
Mhm.
So Casey, thank you so much. It's so great to see you. Thank you for joining me in the Learning Lab.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I hope that you'll come back and share your expertise and experience and wisdom with our lead learners soon. Lead learners, it's time to hang up our lab coats until next time. Meanwhile, you can follow me on Instagram at One Mind Ed Consulting LLC. Please like and share. Be sure to check out Successful Tips on Monday. And until next time, lead, learn, and love, saving lives, making futures, one mind at a time.